Hello and good morning. We hope all of you have a great morning. Actually, it's a Saturday morning. And welcome to our special report on Japanese Prime Minister's state visit. As part of efforts to strengthen bilateral relations with Southeast Asian countries, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is making an official visit to Indonesia and meeting with Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto at the Bogor State Palace today. This meeting between the two leaders is their first since both took office last October. And this morning with you, I'm Sesko Satrio.
And I'm Siska Becker. And that's right, Sesko. It is a historical meeting between the two state leaders because it's their first meeting since they both took office. And more so for Japan because Prime Minister Ishiba views ASEAN members, including Indonesia, as important partners in advocating a free and open Indo-Pacific. So the discussions will cover security, economics, and also bilateral relations between the two countries.
Yes, and today we will discuss all these issues with a business law and international trade expert from Taruma Negara University, Professor Aryawan Gunadi, and the Deputy Executive Director for Research at CSIS, Safia Muhibat. Thank you, Professor Aryawan and Mbak Fifi, for joining us this morning.
Good morning, ohayo gozaimasu, Mbak Fifi, Prof. Aryawan. Good to see you again in the studio.
Thank you for having us again.
Yeah.
Of course.
So let's, without further ado, this is our special report on the Japanese state's visit.
All right, Sesko, it seems before we go to our live feed to Istana Bogor to watch the procession, the meeting between our two state leaders from Japan and Indonesia, between Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and President Prabowo Subianto, we're now going to have a little chat first with our very special guest who joined us here in the studio. Now, maybe we can go to you first, Mbak Fifi, so we can discuss probably the hot button issue right now in the matter of the relations between Indonesia and Japan, and that is the issue of security. Now, as we know, one of the most interesting aspects of these two state leaders are they were both former defense ministers.
That's true.
And if we see the talking points between the two state leaders, security is the top priority in the cooperation between the two countries. And preceding this meeting, both of defense minister from Indonesia and Japan have already met. And if we go even further back to the first official statement made by Prime Minister Ishiba as Prime Minister, he mentioned about the challenges that Japan is facing right now in terms of security, with China and Russia encroaching Japan's airspace with the jet planes, and also the looming threat of North Korea. He has mentioned repeatedly how important security issues are for Japan. Now, maybe you can enlighten us and give us more context in the terms of Indonesia and Japan relations. How significant is Indonesia to Japan in ensuring the safety of the region, and vice versa, Japan to Indonesia?
Sure. I mean, it is a very dynamic relations between the two countries. And I would not say defense security is a top priority for this visit, but I think it's one of the more important issues to be discussed by the two leaders. And indeed, I mean, Japan is, traditionally known as an economic partner for Indonesia, but traditionally as well, it's been a long time since Japan has been a strong supporter for Indonesia's defense and security as well. One of the main an important aspect is, I think, on maritime security issues. Japan has traditionally, for a long time, been supportive of the Indonesian Navy and also Bakamla in terms of how they increase their capacity in securing Indonesia's waters. So different types of technical assistance, trainings. Even last year, still, during former President Jokowi's visit to Japan, also there was an agreement for a patrol boat to be granted for Indonesia. So it shows that this is something that has been the more important issues in the Indonesia-Japan cooperation. So it's not something new. Yes, definitely you are right in saying that defense now seems to be on top of the list because the two leaders are former defense ministers. But I'd like to think of it as a part of a very long tradition of defense security cooperation between Indonesia and Japan.
Yeah, we also know that Japan has been a crucial economic partner for Indonesia for decades. And maybe for the trade side, Professor Aryawan, Japan is also a major market for Indonesian exports for coal, palm oil, and mineral sizu. And also, Japan has been a significant source of foreign direct investment. So, how important is Japan in Indonesia's economy, Professor Aryawan?
Yes. If we see that Prime Minister Ishiba comes from a political family, so his father is from one of the former Minister of Home Affairs. And then if we see that one of the important agenda from Ishiba is that the first one is he will sign the petrol agreement with President Prabowo, and also focusing on how to manage arm transfer and also military cooperations. And one of that is that, as mentioned by Pak Sesko, is that the trade itself. Because as we know that more than 26.6 billion US dollar in 2023 and 24, Japan has collaborated and has invested many times in Indonesia, including MRT. Because as we know that we built Northeast Line and we will build East-West Line. So the more investment will come from Japan. And we do hope that, as mentioned before, the trade partners, because as we know that Japan is one of the key trading partners and one of the third largest trading partners in Indonesia. So we do hope that the export and import from Japan will be bigger than 2024. And if we know that today agenda also plan to cut off some tariffs, because the protocol has been amended with Indonesia-Japan economic cooperations.
Right, interesting. Before we go into further discussion about the relations between Indonesia and Japan, let's first learn about the profile of the Japanese Prime Minister.
Yeah, the Japanese Prime Minister, I think.
So the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is scheduled to meet with President Prabowo Subianto in Bogor on Saturday, January 11th. Discussions during the meeting would center on defense and economic issues. Below is a brief profile of a Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba began his international trips to two countries in Southeast Asian region, Indonesia and Malaysia, as he sought to strengthen defense and economic ties with the two countries. That would be Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's first international trips after being installed as Japanese Prime Minister in October last year. His visit underscores the important role of the two Southeast Asian countries amid China's increasing maritime presence in the region. Malaysia assumed the ASEAN chairmanship this year, while Indonesia is Southeast Asia's largest economy. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba was born in February 1957 and is blessed with two children. He was born and raised in Tokyo from a political family. His father, Jiro Ishiba, served as governor of Tottori Prefecture from 1959 to 1974 before becoming the Minister of Home Affairs. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has spent most of his time in the politics. After graduating from Keio University, he spends a stint in banking business before venturing into politics following the demise of his father in 1986. And from there on, he has assumed various political jobs until he was appointed defense minister before his appointment as prime minister last year. He is also the president of Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP. Ishiba is also known as a Gunji Otaku, or a military geek, due to his extensive knowledge of the armed forces and the fact that he likes to relax by building plastic models of warplanes and ships. In a past TV interview, he described the hobby as like bringing a dream to reality. He once stayed up all night assembling a miniature version of the aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov to present to the Russian defense minister. Like Ishiba, President Prabowo Subianto also served as defense minister under the administration of former President Joko Widodo from 2019 to 2023. President Prabowo is also chairman of the Great Indonesia Movement Party, or Gerindra. Prime Minister Ishiba is known to have extensive experience in agricultural policies and defense policies, media reports suggested. Prime Minister Ishiba has been a key figure within the LDP, with him being elected as president of LDP since 2024. Before meeting with President Prabowo, Prime Minister Ishiba met with Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim on Friday. In regard to Indonesia, media reports said that both leaders are expected to focus on military cooperation and arms transfers. Ishiba's visit to Indonesia follows recent developments on bilateral relations. Defense Minister Gen Nakatani met with his Indonesian counterpart on January 7th in Jakarta, agreeing that defense officials from both countries would begin discussions on maritime security cooperation. In the meeting with Prabowo, Ishiba is expected to pledge the provision of high-speed patrol boats as part of the OSA initiative. The two leaders will also discuss the joint development of vessel based on Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force destroyers.
And that was the brief profile of Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba that arrived in Indonesia yesterday evening. And now we'll go to the State Palace in Bogor to see the latest situation there.
Continue our chat with our guest, Mbak Vivi and Prof. Aryawan. Now, as we learned before, Prime Minister Ishiba visited Malaysia before he came here to Indonesia, arrived yesterday. So obviously he wants to strengthen relations, not just with Indonesia, but the whole of ASEAN as a region. How significant is ASEAN to Japan?
It's very significant, I think. Japan, as advanced as a country as it is, but I think in terms of geographical location, it's surrounded by really big countries like China, and it has very close relations with the US, and then it has some problematic relations with South Korea as well. So I think, going southwards, the countries in Southeast Asia pose very significant role in terms of how Japan navigates the whole region. And Japan has been very supportive in the development of ASEAN. It's one of its top partner. It has supported ASEAN in different ways in terms of its economic relations, political security relations as well. And I do think that his coming to Malaysia also signifies that Malaysia will be chair of ASEAN next year. So I do think that Japan would like to cooperate even more with the next chair of ASEAN. So that signifies his visit to Malaysia.
Yeah. Malaysia as leader of ASEAN, and Indonesia biggest economy in ASEAN.
And I would like to know, Mbak Vivi, we know that when Prabowo first took office, the first country he visited was China, and it spread messages wildly, maybe around the world. And the first visit, the state visit of Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is to Malaysia and Indonesia. What message is he trying to convey here?
Oh, it's really difficult to understand the decisions of which country comes first and everything. What's interesting is that, whether we like it or not, US-China rivalry is something that is very present in the region, and it really shapes the whole geopolitical dynamics in the region. So President Prabowo's visit to China and then immediately to the US, I think, reflects Indonesia's concern with regards to this whole, US-China geopolitical rivalry. And I do think that Indonesia would like to avoid any negative consequences of this rivalry, and if possible, actually take benefit from this competition. And I think that's what President Prabowo was trying to do with these visits. For Japan, of course, their answer or their reaction to US-China rivalry is to get closer to ASEAN countries. And I think that makes sense because this is the countries that would present as partners to Japan. And I think, like I said, at the back of it all is the US-China rivalry. Yeah.
Right. Interesting how we can play a vital role in the Asia-Pacific region. Oh, yeah.
And to Prof. Aryawan, still in relation about with China here, you said that Japan is the third biggest trade partner of Indonesia, and with the rising of China, how can Japan maintain their relation with us?
Yeah, that's interesting because as many times discussed, that Indonesia now become full membership in BRICS. So, and Mrs. Siska mentioned that Prabowo first visit is that in China. So as we know that the relation between Indonesia and China now it's quite stronger because we have many trade agreements that made by Indonesia and China. And with Japan itself, it's quite interesting because PM visit to Malaysia, one of them to discuss about South China Sea issues. And another one is that cybersecurity, because that's also one of the main issue of Japan. And of course, ASEAN, especially Malaysia, as mentioned also by Ibu Vivi, will be chair of the ASEAN. And this is one of the important role in ASEAN, Malaysia. So therefore, they will, of course, Japan will have a good relationship with Malaysia. And we do hope that the collaborations between Indonesia with China and also collaboration with Japan will be going stronger. Because as we know that in my file that the sectors include infrastructure, mining, and manufacture is one of the important role while we have a trading sector with China in 2022 until 2024. So we do hope that these collaborations with Japan, also with China, will still establish until the next period of time.
All right, interesting, Prof. Now, just now we saw President Prabowo Subianto. I think he was getting ready his ministers to welcome Prime Minister Ishiba, which is quite interesting to see. You can see everyone is smiling, and yeah, I think the air of optimism is quite evident there as we welcome.
The location is in Bogor, I think.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's Bogor.
the State
Bogor
Palace,
Palace,
in Bogor.
So the latest report that we have that the Japanese Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba, is really close by there. We can see his convoy being greeted by the local kids, waving the Japanese flag, signifying the strong friendship between the two countries as we go to another chapter of cooperation.
We know that Bogor is called also the rainy city, but I think the weather is good. It's sunny there in Bogor right now.
It's a beautiful morning right now in Bogor. All right, maybe we can continue a little bit about economic cooperation, Prof. Aryawan.
Yes.
Now, as we know, with the previous administration in Indonesia, with President Joko Widodo, the focus when it comes to foreign investment was on infrastructure, because President Joko Widodo at that time want to expand infrastructure throughout Indonesia. Now, what do you say is the focus right now for President Prabowo Subianto when it comes to foreign investments, especially from Japan? Would you know anything about it?
Yes, thank you, Siska. More than 2,000 companies from Japan invest in Indonesia. And of course, if I'm asked what is the focusing of Prabowo administrations, one of them is that the security and defense. That's one of the, important issue.
Okay.
And the second one is that the arm transfer. That's why, because both of them are from the former Minister of Defense, I think they will discuss more how this security will be established until the next period. And of course, Mr. Prabowo will continue with Jokowi administrations because still we have some projects in Indonesia regarding infrastructure, and we need the collaboration also from Japan because Japan will offer some loans to Indonesia, maybe regarding the infrastructure. And of course, we need several resources from Japan, especially from its company, infrastructure company, and establish the toll road and everything.
Of course. I think one of the most highly anticipated project here by Japan and in Jakarta in particular is the expansion of the MRT.
Yes,
yes.
Everybody's looking forward to that.
And we can see in your screen that the Prime Minister of Japan, I think, is arriving in the State Palace in Bogor.
Yes.
That's the car of Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba.
It's now in the long way leading up to the State Palace. Again, it's a beautiful morning. The State Palace in Bogor is looking quite majestic from this view that we have. Again, flags of Indonesia and Japan lining up on the side of the road. Right, while we wait for the Prime Minister to embark from his vehicle, now, Mbak Fifi, what is your expectation of the strengthening of the bilateral relations, diplomatic relations between Japan and Indonesia as this visit of the Prime Minister is now happening in Jakarta, especially now as we do have a new administration, a new president taking lead in Indonesia?
Sure. I think, bilateral relations between Indonesia and Japan is the type that can only grow stronger. Yes, there are challenges, some trade imbalances, for example, but those have been sort of like sorted out through dialogues, continuous dialogues between the two countries. While the common challenges continue to remain and even, increase as years go by. So that means there is more and more incentive for them to cooperate together. So this is the kinds of bilateral relations that can only grow stronger.
Okay, so quite optimistic.
Yes,
about the
absolutely.
relations. Okay, we're still watching the car of the
Yes.
Prime Minister going ever so slowly. I think the Prime Minister and maybe the First Lady of Japan is also
It's also in
enjoying,
the car.
enjoying the performance of the marching band. There we have President Prabowo Subianto awaiting the arrival of the Prime Minister. Now this is an interesting meeting because it is their first meeting together as
Yep,
state
that's
leaders since both took office. So they are both new in their position in the highest office of their respective countries. So officially another chapter for Indonesian-Japan relations.
So I would like to know also I want to ask Fifi. Fifi, is there any particular concern from the Japanese Prime Minister about the growing intention of China on the other side? And you see that maybe he wants to talk with President Trump.
Of course, South China Sea is indeed a very important concern of Japan. And I think for Japan, the role of Indonesia in managing the dispute is very important. So that's why they've been very supportive in terms of enhancing Indonesia's capacity to secure its maritime territory.
Excuse me, Mbak Fifi, you can just hold on for a little moment because I think the Prime Minister is now going to go out of his vehicle and being greeted by President Prabowo Subianto himself right there by the car. There they are.
Hormat Senjata! Rock! Go, Sunjana! Rock! Rapor upacara penyambutan siap dimulai. Selanjutnya pasukan siap diperiksa. Pemeriksaan pasukan telah dilaksanakan. Laporan selesai. Kembali ke tempat.
Yeah, so we can see that President Prabowo Subianto is introducing his cabinet members to Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. And
Erlangga Hartarto,
yeah.
Mr. Zulkifli Hasan also in the lineup. He's the Minister for Informatics and Communication.
Yeah, we can see that it's already in the end of the line of the cabinet member, and now I think they're moving to the Japanese cabinet members. This President Prabowo now is being introduced with the members from the Japanese entourage. And once again, maybe we can go to about Fifi again, that we were talking about is the situation growing in South China Sea, and also the claims, China's claims. Is there anything specific maybe will be discussed by President Prabowo Subianto and Japanese Prime Minister?
Specifically on South China Sea, I don't think that would be the case. They will talk about the overall security situation in the region, that's for sure. And then they will discuss how the two countries can cooperate in terms of contributing to stability and security in the region. Because I don't think the two leaders, unless it's something, it's a closed door discussion, if it's, I don't think they're going to, detail all their each and every concern they have about China's expansion, for example. So I don't think that's something they would do, but they will talk about the overall defense and security relations in the region. Yeah.
But the meeting with, I think before the Shafri Shamsuddin,
Yes.
our defense minister, was it a closed door meeting with also defense?
It was a closed door meeting. It was a closed door meeting, but afterwards there was some sort of press statement, I think, from the Ministry of Defense, which gave, I think, a very broad description about what are being discussed by the two ministers. I think some of the points that was made was that the usual how Japan can assist Indonesia in terms of, for example, technical assistance.
Okay.
And then they also talk about joint exercises. They talk about personal exchanges. And I think one of the more important ones is, I think, something that Professor Aryawan has also discussed, is about the technology transfer in terms of defense equipment. Yeah.
Okay. So with, maybe I can also say, the rising role of Singapore, do you think, maybe I will go to Professor Aryawan, do you think the Japan will remain a major investment source in Indonesia with the uprising of Singapore?
That's a good question. Continuing from Mrs. Vivi, that in August 2024, Indonesia and Japan has agreed to amend IGEPA, Indonesia-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, to cut and reduce tariff maybe more than 112 Indonesian items, including fishery and fruits.
Okay.
So of course it will be compete with China and Singapore, while Indonesia agreed to improve market access from 25 Japanese products, included stainless steel and automotive goods, because we know that Japan export to Indonesia is more related to automotive, machinery, AI, robotic, and electric vehicles. And of course, we see that even Indonesia have a good relation with China, with the BRICS itself, and also Singapore. But we do hope that our relation to Japan will still okay and still have a good relation by cutting its tariff.
Okay.
All right. While we witness the protocol procession happening at the State Palace in Bogor, maybe I would like to follow up on what Prof. Aryawan mentioned earlier about Indonesia's admittance to the BRICS alliance as a full member. Mbak Vivi, do you think us being a full member of BRICS will have any impact on our relations with Japan?
Personally, I don't think so, because Japan, no matter what policies Indonesia has made with regards to BRICS, I think it's in Japan's interest to maintain good relations with Indonesia and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, and we're still, yet to see, what goes on with BRICS, what this new membership entails. But I think for the time being, it's business as usual for the two leaders. Yeah.
Why is Indonesia and Japan, I think, they are so strong together? Is there any specific reason, Mbak Vivi, you think?
Oh, that's an interesting question. For the economic relations, I think Prof. Aryawan is more versed to answer it than me. But I do think that in terms of security relations, they share similar concerns in terms of the stability and security in the region. And with Japan being more advanced in terms of technology, they are very keen in terms of assisting Indonesia to also enhance its capacity, because Indonesia's strong role in the stability and security of the region would only mean good for Japan, because Japan depends on a lot of other countries to maintain security in the region.
Okay. And how about from the trade side or economic side, Professor Aryawan?
Yes, of course, but good points from Ibu Vivi, that if we see from the historical approach that Indonesia has been colonialized by Japan, of course, a few years ago. And we know that these bilateral relationships established since after they using a trade agreement and then economic cooperation. And if we know that from the economic cooperation side, they also depending each other, especially in defense partnership. Because if we know that in January 2025, Japan, Indonesia agreed to the some of the trade and defense agreement, and they will discuss it more in today's event. And also related to the energy transition initiative and infrastructure project, as I mentioned before, they will continue their project with AI, machinery, armed forces. Both of them are depending each other. So I think from this side, we know that Indonesia needs Japan and Japan needs some technology and infrastructure from Japan.
Okay. Now, Prof. Aryawan, please tell us more also about the Indonesia-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, which has been implemented for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
What's your thought on it? And would there be any possibilities of the agreement to be expanded or further developed during this visit?
Yes, I think true, and it's agree. Because why? Because this cooperation has been established since a long time ago. And then they agreed for the amendment to cut more than 112 tariffs. So we see that the free flow from trade and goods will be done until this year. And today cooperations and today meeting between President Prabowo and PM Ishiba will make it grow and stronger, because we need the cooperation. IGPA will cut several taxes, and there will be more smooth the collaboration, the trade negotiation, and so we do hope that both agreement will be implemented as soon as possible. If we see comparing with OECD agreement, we need time because Indonesia is still in the process of accession. But BRICS membership, as mentioned by Ibu Vivi, it's quite fast. It's quite fast. But it's beyond our prediction because it's Indonesia full membership now become a BRICS. So we see between BRICS, between Indonesia accession in OECD and IGEPA with Indonesia and Japan, how far it will be, it will influence Indonesian trade, international trade in abroad.
Okay.
Right.
And to know more maybe about Japan, we'll see the profile of Japan. And Japan is same as us, an archipelagic country located in west in the Pacific Ocean. The country has 5 main islands, namely Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, Kyushu, and Okinawa. And Japan's closest neighbors include South and North Korea, China, and Russia. Japan has a total population of around 125.58 million, with median age of 48.4 years. Low fertility rate and a high number of elderly people caused Japan's population in a downtrend since 2009, when its population was around 128.57 million. Japan is a constitutional monarchy with the emperor as head of state, whose role is limited to ceremonial ones, and the prime minister as head of government. The current emperor, Naruhito, succeeded his father, Akihito. The 62-year-old Naruhito became the 126th monarch in the country in May 2019. The current Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, who succeeded Fumio Kishida on October 1, 2024, following the 2024 Liberal Democratic Party prime ministerial election. Ishiba has been a member of the House of Representatives since 1986 and has served as Minister of Defense from 2007 to 2008 and Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries from 2008 to 2009, as well as being the Secretary General of the LDP from 2012 to 2014. For decades, Japan had been world's second biggest economy after the United States. In more recent times, due to the emergence of China, Japanese economy ranked the 3rd highest globally, ahead of Germany, the biggest economy in Europe. Japan's strong economy made it a member of the G7, which comprised of 7 democratic industrial countries. The G7 held significant influence in shaping global trade trends. The members of this group have strong currencies used in international trade, the vein of the globalized world economy. Japan is also a member of Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC and a prominent member of East Asia Summit. In 2019, Japan held the presidency of G20. On the security front, Japan joined hands with India, Australia, and the US to establish Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, more commonly known as Quad, in 2007. The Quad, which was revived in 2017, is aimed at balancing China's growing military activity in the Indo-Pacific region. Aspiring for free and open Indo-Pacific, the Quad is expected to counter China's maritime planes on the waters of the South China Sea. Diplomatic relation between Japan and Indonesia was established in 1958, 13 years after the Imperial Japan lost the Second World War. In decades since then, trades and investments between the two countries went from strength to strength. The most obvious sign of Japanese influence in Indonesia is on the automotive sector. Japanese car brands such as Toyota, Honda, and Mitsubishi can be easily spotted in every corner of Indonesia. And the same goes with Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki motorbikes. Due to its logistic power, Japan primarily exports machineries and their related services to Indonesia, while Indonesia exports natural gas and other commodities and raw materials to Japan. Trades between Indonesia and Japan slumped to $24.3 billion in 2020 due to COVID-19, but rebounded strongly to $32.5 billion in 2021. In the first 9 months of 2022, two-way trades reached $31.2 billion, an increase of more than 34% compared to the same period a year earlier. Japan is also a major investor in Indonesia with foreign direct investment of $2.77 billion in January to September period. Japan ranked as the 4th largest source of foreign direct investment in Indonesia. So yeah, that was Japan. Maybe we can feel also the hustle and bustle in the city in Japan, and also brand names that we can see in Indonesia, in corners in Indonesia. There's a lot of brands there. And according to the visual, we see that the economic value between Indonesia and Japan slumped in 2020 around the COVID times and gradually increased years after that. So, Pak Aryawan, how's the situation or the value now, the trade between Indonesia and Japan since COVID?
Yeah, I think, of course, when the pandemic COVID time, it's affected many countries, including Japan, Indonesia. But we know that after pandemic COVID, Indonesia, Japan will they come out and then they trying to develop their trade negotiations. I think it's good because why? Because now Indonesia and Japan trying to build the trade relations because they have a good relation more than 50 years. So I think this trade negotiation and trade relation will be established, and then they will have a strategic partnership, defense cooperation, and of course that we have to note Indo-Pacific regional stability. Because why? Because as we know that Japan and Indonesia have signed many cooperation, included military training, technology transfer, and the development of defense industry. pandemic COVID, we hit many fabric, many company in Japan. But as we know that now they're trying to collaborate with many countries like Indonesia now, and we know that competition between Japan and China, we see if we see from the picture that automotive car. We know that I just went from China, five province in China. We see in Shenyang, we see in Beijing, Xiamen, most of them are using autonomous driving, auto driving. So now they compete with Japan, of course, with several brands like Honda, Toyota, something like that. We see that Japan will trying to build more technology on robotic and AI base. So we will see how far they can achieve this accommodation, and they can achieve everything after the pandemic situations.
And one of the efforts are, like you said earlier, that they're going to cut the import tariff.
Yes.
Like 112, you said?
12, yes. Cut the import tariff.
Is that a product of the amendments of the Indonesia-Japan agreement?
Product of the protocol of the amendment to cut more than 112 tariffs, including fisheries, agricultural, because Indonesia also export natural resources, some of the natural resources, fruits, something like that. And Japan will also export to Indonesia related to machinery, electronic vehicles, robotic motor, and several technologies. So we will see that this tax cut will be better for Indonesia and Japan.
Is there any particular reason why the amendments took place? Because I assume maybe it wasn't running well maybe before, and some actions need to be done. So how do you see this?
Yes, because they want the investment is bigger than before. Because if the tariffs increase, it's difficult. Because we know that the free trade nature, because there is many countries, they put many tax, especially like Indonesia and Singapore, Indonesia and China, they sell trade and goods. They sell goods and services. They put many taxes. But if they using a tax cut, the increasing of trade will be bigger. So hopefully with the amendment, with the protocol, everything will be better for Indonesia and Japan. The negotiation, the trade, and the free flow of the trade and service will be bigger than before.
Okay, so I think it's interesting, our discussion, but we have we have a break a little bit. There's a commercial break, just a short one, so don't go anywhere. Stay with us here on the special report on the Japanese Prime Minister visit.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to our special report for the Japanese Prime Minister's state visit in the State Palace in Bogor. Right here on TVR World with me, Siska Becker.
And I'm Sesko Satrio. So here we also accompanied by our experts. I think we will continue our discussion. To Pak Aryawan, to continue our discussion earlier, that you said Japan will cut tariffs in around 112 items. It was a product of the amendments. How was the cooperation or the agreement before, Pak Aryawan? Maybe that's my question. How did the agreement run before? Was it okay or maybe need improvements? Can you give us the insights?
Yes. In August 2024, Indonesia and Japan agreed to amend the economic partnership to reduce tariff barriers, because as we know that this is a global trade issue. And this move is expected to boost Indonesia export to Japan from, in 2023, in my notes, is $20.8 billion US. And will be expected export to 35.9 billion by 2028. So I think by reducing tariff, by cutting tax, it will make export and import will be running well.
Okay.
And of course, it's not the enhance the economic cooperation, but energy transition initiative, because Indonesia and Japan also signed 70 MOU on energy transition with various partners, including Indonesia. So I think by reducing tariff, Indonesia will gain many benefits on that. And then the third one is that by cutting tariff, Indonesia will have possibility to export many goods and tariffs there. Because as we know that Indonesia rich of natural resources, so we can export several our products and tariff goods and services to Japan. And it will be more open, I think.
Right. Now moving on to Mbak Fifi, I would like to discuss further actually about one aspect that we spoke of earlier. We talked about how President Prabowo Subianto has been quite active in pursuing the strengthening of relationship between Indonesia and different partner countries. Now I want to talk about the implications and intricacies that might arise from this relationship, in particular the relationship between Indonesia and China, and also then Indonesia and Japan. Because the matter of security is right now one of the top priorities. Do you think with what's happening in South China Sea and then Indonesia's close economic ties with China, will that have an impact with Japanese interest in the region, especially in its relations with Indonesia?
Well, I think we need to remember that this sort of like dynamics has actually been occurring for the past few years already. And I think not only Indonesia, but a lot of other countries in the region are also facing this dilemma of pursuing closer economic ties with China, but at the same time also maintaining proper relations with other countries as well that might have problems or issues with China. So I don't think that's exclusive for Indonesia. And I think Japan is also doing the same thing. They also have good economic ties with China. You know, I believe that Japan-China trade relations is also very dynamic as well. So they're going through that as well. And I do think that's the issue here is actually how to manage the situation in the region so that all of these different dynamics do not have negative impacts to any of the interests of any countries in the region.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that they're trying their best to keep the economic matters in one hand and political matters in another?
Yes, that's actually what Indonesia has been doing with China.
Okay.
We see that, you know, no matter what sort of like skirmishes going on in the North Natuna Sea, for example, between Indonesia and China, has so far not have that much impact on the economic side of our relations with China. And I think that's something that Indonesia seeks to continue doing. But I think we also need to remember that things might get even more complicated going into the future, you know, with Trump now going to be the leader of the U.S., what's going to happen with U.S.-China relations, and, you know, whatever happens in U.S.-China relations, that will impact countries in the region, that's for sure.
Okay. And talking about U.S.-Japan relations, there's been some statements from Prime Minister Ishiba about his vision of an Asian NATO happening in Japan, and to strengthen the ties between Japan and U.S. to make sure of the peace and security in the Indo-Pacific. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that has been one of the more controversial statements coming out of Tokyo, which I think has been clarified quite a number of times by the officials there. I mean, NATO by itself is called, it's a North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which does not translate anywhere near our region. And that is something that has created a lot of negative responses from a lot of countries, especially China. And even countries in ASEAN has been, you know, quite reluctant to make any further comments on that because of it's very sensitive. But I do think that it's something that Japan has taken into account. We see how many, there have been quite a number of clarifications with regards to that. And I do think that it is in Japan's interest to still maintain good relations with China, as also it tries to maintain good relations with Indonesia and other ASEAN countries.
Yeah, with the
Very dynamic,
it's very dynamic. With the, maybe we could say, heating up condition of the world, and we also been, we can say, colonized maybe by Japan, but I think we have a good relation with Japan for maybe like more than 50 years.
Since 1958,
How do you see, how about the social, cultural relation or people-to-people relation between Japan and Indonesia. How do you see our relation as people-to-people?
It's very dynamic, I think, and I think it's one of the stronger points of our relations with Japan. When you talk about sociocultural, of course, you talk about issues like education. I think Aryaman has also mentioned that. It's very strong education relations between Indonesia and Japan. Japan has given quite a large number of scholarships for Indonesian students since the 1970s. I think we recognize a lot of Indonesian prominent leaders have had their education in Japan as well. And then there's also this very strong influence from Japan culture and vice versa, the interest of Japanese people towards Indonesian culture and Indonesian people towards Japanese culture. And I think that has been one of the very vital role in bringing the two countries together. But aside from the traditional socio-cultural, there is one point that I'd like to mention. Indonesia and Japan are two countries that are very unfortunate in terms of they are both very prone to natural disasters. So that is why there have also been very close cooperation between Japan and Indonesia in terms of disaster management. And I think that is something that both countries, and I hope it is part of the discussions between the two leaders, how we can, gradually increase the effectiveness and the frequencies of this disaster management cooperation.
I think so. We spoke with Ibu Dwi Korita quite a while ago, and she also mentioned the strong relations between Japan and Indonesia when it comes to the implementation of the early warning system technology.
Yes.
I think we are using a lot of Japanese technology, especially for tsunami warning, which is also quite a prominent problem in Japan. So yes, of course, we are very hopeful for even more cooperation in that department.
I think we have what other countries don't have between us and Japan is that a close relation. Our country is so close to the Ring of Fire.
Ring of Fire, that's true.
Yes.
I think that's what other countries don't have between Indonesia and Japan. And to Professor Aryawan, how do you see this? The close relation between people Indonesia and Japan, and also I think we have special connection with Japan. Will it increase the trade, or maybe like in tourism sector?
Yes,
what will increase?
Yes, from the not only from tourism, because as I mentioned before that now Japan is one of the favorite tourism object from people in Indonesia. So most of them visit Hokkaido, Tokyo, Kyoto, Kobe. So many good locations, tourist destination in Japan. I think it's good. It will increase the tourism destinations because also tourism is also connected with the social culture. As mentioned by Ibu Vivi, that now based on the MAX program, Indonesia and Japan, they provide many scholarship, including energy, technology, and medical for Indonesian students from the undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral degree. So I think tourism also connected with the social and culture, and also the humanitarian sites, like Ibu Vivi mentioned, because we have disaster management system, and this is based on the cooperation between Indonesia and Japan. Because we have also both countries have a long cooperation is managing the disaster and humanitarian mission. So I think it will increase the tourism position, tourism object will be also one of the favorite destination from Indonesian people, I think.
Okay, it seems like when we see it from different aspects, the relations between Indonesia and Japan has been going quite strong, and there's even more rooms to improvement. Let's learn more about the bilateral relations between Indonesia and Japan, which has been flourishing very much in various fields since the establishment of diplomatic relations in April 1958. The two countries have so far established cooperation in almost all business sectors. Let's learn more.
The journey and closeness of the relationship between the two countries has so far served as strong evidence of the inter-society relationship, as the diplomatic relation continues to strengthen year to year. Indonesia is not only a partner of Japan in progress, but also a beacon for the growth, peace, and stability of the region. The frequent visits of the two countries' leaders are among many factors which reflect the strong relationship between the two countries. The latest one was in December 16, 2023, when President Joko Widodo visited Japan to attend the commemorative summit for the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan friendship and cooperation. During the visit, the Indonesian president also met with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba began Thursday, January the 9th, a 4-day trip to Malaysia and Indonesia to sit down with their leaders as Tokyo aims to strengthen economic and security ties with the Southeast Asian nation. Prime Minister Ishiba will then visit Indonesia and is scheduled to hold a meeting with President Prabowo Subianto in Jakarta on Saturday, January the 11th. The leaders of the two countries have frequently held bilateral meetings during the last several years to further strengthen cooperation in various fields. In September 2023 was one of milestones in the economic relationships, during which the two countries agreed to elevate the bilateral relationship to a comprehensive and strategic partnership in light of the long-standing friendship and the progress of cooperation in various areas, thereby further strengthening bilateral relations. The progress of bilateral cooperation between Japan and Indonesia has contributed to Indonesia's development to date, particularly through economic relations and economic cooperation. At present, almost 2,000 Japanese companies with about 7.2 million of Indonesian employees are operating throughout Indonesia, and together they contribute approximately 8.5% to Indonesia's GDP and nearly 25% of exports, according to a statement issued by the Foreign Minister of Japan ahead President of Joko Widodo's visit on December 16, 2023. Looking to the future, Japan intends to further enhance cooperation with Indonesia under the Comprehensive and Strategic Partnership, including by deepening the bilateral cooperation and initiatives, as well as developing the achievements. Japan will, for example, continue to support the extension of the Jakarta Mass Rapid Transit, or MRT, development, and several other projects such as the Patimban Port Development in Subang, West Java, Bekasi Automobile Proving Ground Project, and technical cooperation for transit-oriented development. In other fields, Japan also intends to further cooperate in maritime and outer islands development, such as provision of patrol vessel and fisheries patrol vessels, development of fisheries ports and markets. Japan also cooperates with the Indonesian government in the development of the country's new capital, Nusantara, such as in technical cooperation support and also in various other fields, such as in legal system development, information and communications cooperation, agriculture, science and technology, and healthcare. Indonesia also continues to expand trade relations with Japan. On August 8, 2024, Trade Minister Zulkifli Hasan and Japan's Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa signed the Protocol of Amendment to the Indonesia-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement. The protocol is expected to shoot up the total value of Indonesia's exports to Japan to $35.9 billion by 2028, or about 58% higher than the $20.8 billion recorded in 2023. According to the Indonesian minister, the protocol changes several chapters of the partnership agreement, namely trade in goods, trade in services, electronic commerce, movement of natural persons or MNP, cooperation in intellectual property, and government procurement.
That was the news about the flourishing economic ties between Indonesia and Japan. And one of the things that's mentioned there is the MRT Jakarta.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are very much looking forward to the
Yeah, of
expansion
course.
of the routes.
So, Professor Aaron, do you have any updates on the MRT Jakarta?
Yeah, I think from the Indonesia-Japan cooperation, we see that we have first phase. And hopefully, based on today negotiations, today discussion with the President Prabowo, of course, we will continue with the second phase. And hopefully, it will be implemented soon. Because if we know that the distance between, the distance time between the first phase and the second phase quite be longer. So hopefully, it will be faster than before, I think. So hopefully the MRT Jakarta will be continued and we will get the second phase from the west side, I think.
The west side, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Prof. Moreover, on Japanese investment in Indonesia, as we know, we've seen from a few of the video packages we've showed our viewers that Japanese presence in Indonesia is very much amplified by the automotive brands. Toyota, Honda, Suzuki is ubiquitous in Indonesian streets. But right now, it's all about EV. And as you know, the EV market is very much largely dominated by Chinese brands.
Chinese brands.
Do you think Japan will try to curb their way into the EV market in Indonesia? And is there any chance for that happening?
Yeah, I think China will focusing on EV as you mentioned before. That's why when they get tax increase from US more than 400% last year, there will be reaction from China sides. And of course, focusing in EV, it's good for China because they are focusing on more practical than Japan. Japan, it's more safe in automotive sides.
Yeah.
They produce, but they still consistent on their product. Like as you know, that Honda, Toyota, and several products also one of the best product from Japan, especially in automotive. But China will focusing on EV, focusing on auto driving. Which another side, Japan will focusing with robotic and AI and etc. But we will see the competition between China and Japan in electronic and automotive side. But the export from Japan to Indonesia, especially from the manufacturer, especially from electronic and motor spare part and everything, it's quite bigger. It's going bigger and going increase year per year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm still not convinced that it is feasible or not for the EV sector from Japan, because we know that it's commonly known. I think brands from Japan is a bit pricey between China's brands. So how do you see this? Will Japan only focus on other things, AI, maybe manufacture, and not the EV sector?
Yes, I think of course. Some people comparing between Japan technology and China. They said that Japan is, some of them say their opinion that Japan is better than China.
Yes.
China better than Japan. It depends how we see this case. But if we see Japan that they will make, they're very proud with their local product. That's why automotive cars and etc. Their brand, they're trying to build a strong brand. So when they transfer to other country, it will be known and it will be more stable than in China. China a bit more practical. They use many products, many products from China like automotive in EV and etc. But we don't know whether this product will be supported by the better spare part, will be supported by another parts to maintain this product. Because the problem is that the maintain itself. Because we can buy it cheaper, but how about the maintain and everything? Japan will concern with that, with that product.
Can we also say that because having the similar background, Indonesia and Japan, we are prone to natural disasters. Can we say that Japan have the better technology maybe in infrastructure?
Yes, I think we will see. Because I've discussed you informally before in this meeting, in this event, that China built bush and support Indonesia for the speed train. And then Japan actively now promoting and support MRT for the second phase. So we will see whether it's good or not. We can compare after they finish the MRT second phase. if it is good, and we believe that it will support Indonesian people, especially for their mobility between one place to another place. We will
Hopefully
see.
the competition between the two countries will only
Yes.
benefit us.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
only benefit.
That's
Indonesian
good.
consumers. Right. But Fifi, when we talk about EV, it is strongly related to clean energy transition and also energy independence and energy security, which has been a global challenge. Now, how do you think are the possibilities for Indonesia to strengthen cooperation with Japan in that sector in energy?
I mean, it has been part of the bilateral relations for quite some time, even though it's not one of the stronger or more prioritized ones. But Japan has a lot of interest in increasing cooperation with Indonesia in terms of clean energy, and there has been efforts to do that. One of Japan's institution, JICA, I think has been quite active in terms of assisting a lot of developing countries in clean energy. So I think Indonesia is one of them. But like I said, it's not one of the more prominent cooperation that we've talked about, but that's only because there are other issues that has been more on the front line between the two countries.
Yeah, that's right. I think, again, one of the hot button issues is right now security. So I would like to circle back on that
Sure.
because you mentioned about the controversial statement made by the Prime Minister Ishiba concerning security issues in the region, such as the Asian NATO statement. And other than that, we also heard that once in an official statement that he made upon the public, is how he likened the situation in Asia to be somewhat similar to what happened between Russia and Ukraine. And he has said that the next Ukraine can be East Asia. Is that an exaggeration or is there any truth in it? What are your thoughts?
I think that sort of discussion has been going on in a lot of different occasions as well. So not only from the Japanese Prime Minister, but the similar concern has been occurring in a lot of different events. So we have to admit that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it shows that Japan is very concerned with its position and survival, basically, in the region with a lot of that's going on with China's existence in the assertiveness also in the region. So that has been one of their main concerns. And I think going forward into the future, we might need to get ready for more dynamics in terms of these issues. We've heard about how President-elect Trump has been saying about acquiring Greenland, Canada, Panama, and so on. So this sort of like major power attitude towards smaller states, I think is going to be even more frequent in the future.
How do you think Indonesia should position themselves, with this looming threat of more aggressive attitude from major players?
Well, I think Indonesia's main concern is our national integrity, and I think that's first and foremost. And I think for that, there are a lot of aspects to be improved. Of course, defense and security is one of them. And therefore, increasing cooperation with counterparts like Japan, I think, becomes even more vital because Japan has been giving us a lot of technical assistance in terms of enhancing our capacity to guard our territory, basically.
Yeah, and to continue with that, if we, of course, the meeting is now still still happening, but if we look on the foreign media articles, they said that Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba always mentioned that his visit to Malaysia, Indonesia, is to make their relation with us stronger amid the growing tensions from China. So how do you see this? And is it really a concern? I mean, or because if we see the media from Indonesia, it's always just you're talking about economics, you're talking about the future plans, but especially Japanese media, they said that they are concerned of the rising power China in the South China Sea. Is it really their concern or Shigeru Ishiba's concern?
Yes, it's definitely their concern. If you we were watching the profile of Japan earlier, and it said that Japan's immediate neighbors are South and North Korea, Russia, and China.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine that? So it is definitely in their concern. And so far, you know, since after World War II, Japan has been quite reliant on the U.S. in terms of, you know, securing the region. So basically, and I think going forward with, with the prospect of Trump back in the leadership in the U.S. and the kinds of policies he would make in terms of his foreign policies, I think it's quite normal for Japan to be wary of its future. You know, if it cannot. You can no longer rely on the U.S. for security, that it needs to rely on other countries.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I think we just heard.
now to our live
yes,
feed,
go to
the
the
State Palace.
the Bogor State Palace.
Seluruh delegasi pemerintah Jepang.
石破茂総理大臣閣下、そして日本からの訪問団の皆様、ありがとうございます。ようこそいらっしゃいました。
Sekali lagi saya ucapkan selamat datang di Indonesia dan saya ingin menyampaikan bahwa ini kehormatan yang besar bagi kami karena kami memandang Jepang sebagai mitra dan sahabat yang lama.
改めまして、インドネシアにようこそいらっしゃいました。皆様がですね、インドネシアに訪問してくださったことを非常に光栄に思っております。日本はにとって大変重要なパートナーであると考えております。
Kunjungan ini juga adalah simbol dari komitmen kedua negara untuk memperkuat dan memperkokoh hubungan antara dua negara di semua bidang.
今回の訪問は両国のさまざまな分野における協力関係を強化するコミットを表すシンボルだと考えております。
Sebagaimana Yang Mulia sudah mungkin mempelajari, pemerintah yang saya pimpin memiliki prioritas-prioritas yang penting yang akan kami laksanakan.
閣下もご存知かと思いますが、私の政権はさまざまな優先順位がございます、持っています。
Yang pertama adalah swasembada pangan.
第一はですね、食料。
Yang kedua swasembada energi.
その次にですね、エネルギーの安全保障。
Yang ketiga adalah hilirisasi dan industrialisasi dari sumber daya alam kita.
そして、3つ目は天然資源のインドネシアの天然資源の、産業化および下流化でございます。
Yang keempat, kami ingin menghilangkan kelaparan bagi rakyat Indonesia karena rakyat Indonesia masih sebagian mengalami kurang gizi.
その次にですね、大事なのがインドネシアの国民の、栄養を保つことが私たちの重要プログラムになっております。
Yang terakhir, kami juga ingin membangun kemampuan kami di bidang pertahanan.
でそして次に、防衛力、を向上させる。
Karena itu kami membuka diri seandainya pihak Jepang ingin ikut serta dalam pembangunan ekonomi Indonesia ke depan.
そのようにですね、もし 日本側がインドネシアの経済発展に参加したいのであれば、ぜひ歓迎したいと考えております。
Dalam program hilirisasi kami sangat terbuka untuk industri Jepang ikut dalam program hilirisasi kami di semua bidang sumber daya alam kita.
特にですね、天然資源の下流化、分野においては、ぜひですね、参加を歓迎していると。
Kami juga ingin menyampaikan bahwa kami sangat berterima kasih kepada Jepang selama ini aktif di ekonomi kita dan sangat besar membantu kita di bidang pendidikan, di bidang pembangunan sumber daya manusia, dan kami ingin hal ini bisa diteruskan.
そしてですね、この場を借りて、これまで日本が、経済分野、教育分野、そして人材育成分野において、長年インドネシアに協力、支援し続けたことに対して感謝を申し上げたいと思います。
Terima kasih.
ありがとうございます。
大統領閣下ありがとうございました。APEC でも短時間お話をさせていただきましたが、今回このような形で訪問できて大変に感謝をいたしております。
Yang mulia Bapak Presiden, terima kasih banyak. Kita pernah bertemu di KTT APEC walaupun waktunya singkat. Sekarang saya merasa berbahagia dapat berkunjung ke Indonesia dan bertemu dengan Yang Mulia.
また私も長く国会議員を務め、大臣も何度も務めましたが、このような歓迎をいただいたのは初めてのことであります。大変に温かい歓迎に心より感謝を申し上げます。
Dan saya sekali lagi mengucapkan terima kasih atas sambutan hangat yang luar biasa. Saya sudah lama menjadi anggota DPR dan pernah menjabat sebagai menteri di Jepang, tetapi sambutan luar biasa ini itu pertama kali bagi saya.
お国を訪問させていただくのは34年ぶりになります。まだ若い頃、当選2回の若い頃訪問させていただいて以来、34年ぶりに訪れることができました。 その発展ぶりには非常に驚いておりますが、今大統領閣下がご指摘になりました食料安全保障、エネルギー安全保障、天然資源の下流化、国民の栄養の向上、防衛力の向上、我が国として可能な限りの協力をさせていただきたいと考えております。
Dan saya ke Indonesia setelah 34 tahun. Saya pernah ke Indonesia waktu saya masih muda sebagai anggota DPR periode kedua. Dan saya terharu atas perkembangan Indonesia selama ini. Maka saya ingin berkontribusi dan bekerja sama dengan Indonesia tentang hal-hal dan bidang-bidang yang sudah disampaikan oleh Yang Mulia Bapak Presiden, antara lain swasembada pangan dan energi, sumber daya alam dan hilirisasi dan industrialisasi, dan makan bergizi untuk masyarakat dan bidang keamanan.
共に島国であり、海洋国家であり、貿易国家であり、そしてまた大国の間にあって、大国の例えばアメリカ、中国、大国の間にあって、その関係バランスに配慮しながら外交を進めていくという点において非常に似ているという感じを持っております。
Dan saya merasa Jepang dan Indonesia punya banyak kesamaan Kita sama-sama negara kepulauan dan negara maritim dan juga negara perdagangan. Kami juga berada di tengah negara-negara besar seperti Amerika Serikat dan Tiongkok, maka kita perlu memperhatikan atas keseimbangan dalam kebijakan diplomasi.
国は、20年後に建国100年を迎えられます。その時に国の経済がさらに発展しますように、そしてお国と我が国の協力により、あるいは多くの国々の協力により、中東の問題も、あるいはヨーロッパの問題も、北東アジアの問題もいい方向に解決していくことができますように、世界がより平和になりますように、世界最大のムスリム人口を誇っておられますお国との協力を進めてまいりたい。
Saw the official meeting between the two state leaders with each of the cabinet of Japan and Indonesia, where they discussed the different sectors where cooperation will again be strengthened between Japan and Indonesia. Now we can go to our guests to ask them their thoughts and opinions about those issues. Now, we hear how President Prabowo Subianto mentioned about food security and energy security as being his top priority in his administration. Prof. Aryawan, how do you think Indonesia and Japan can strengthen relations in that sector?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, that energy is one of the priority sector that will be offered by President Prabowo, and he said that if Japan would like to contribute, they will open for the cooperation, and of course Japan, like Prime Minister said, that we will support, and then this is a good relation because it's his revisit after 35 or 37 years.
Yes, that's interesting.
And yes, it's been a long time, and he appreciate that the progressive of Indonesian development of Indonesian in for nowadays. And for the secondly is that the cooperation for food nutritious meal, free nutritious meal. I think it's one of the priority program of Mr. Prabowo, and because they think that the people of Indonesia need this, and Japan commitment to support Indonesia for this, I think we'll be discussing on today's program, maybe in technically with their among their ministers. We will see how far they support for free nutritious meal, the program of Bapak Prabowo. And we do hope that with all this collaboration will make Indonesia and Japan more stronger. Because if we see the PM mentioned Tiongkok or China. So again, this is maybe we see the progressive of China, how they approach many people, many countries, especially in ASEAN. And we will see how far Japan will contribute, will influence people in Indonesia.
In what part particularly do you think, and technically, Japan will contribute in the food security or nutritious meal?
Yes, I think Japan will, this is a good question. Japan will invest, I think, some funds to support this. Because why? Because some of the budget from Indonesia, I think, will be cut because of this program.
Okay.
Some of the department will focusing on this. And this is one of the main program of Mr. President Prabowo. So we will see how far Japan contribution for this, because I heard that they will focusing with several agreements among these cooperations. And of course, the second one is that the interesting stat is that the energy transition initiative, because we have Asia Zero Emission Community ministerial meeting in Jakarta last time. So Japan signed multiple memorandum of understanding to promote decarbonization and energy transition in Asia. I think this is also connected with what Pak Prabowo mentioned. One of the focusing program beside free nutritious meal program by Mr. President. I think that's it.
Fifi, continuing on the topic of the free nutritious meal, the centerpiece of President Prabowo Subianto's domestic agenda. Previously, the government has also collaborated with, I think, U.S. Dairy Council and also the Agricultural Department of some states in the U.S. So now we hear that there's this want to become also partners with Japan to support this program. What are your thoughts on this, of making this domestic agenda a bargaining talking point with different countries?
Sure, I think it's, I mean, it's not something that's odd. I mean, it's quite common for when a country has a very important national project and they would bring it for as an agenda when it interacts with other countries. And I think, for example, previous President Joko Widodo also, because he was focusing on a lot of infrastructure issues, and that was a main part of the agenda when he deals with other countries. And I think different from infrastructure, the food program, I think, is something that is easier to become an agenda for cooperation because it's not a sensitive issue at all. And I think everybody every country is interested in sort of like eradicating poverty, eradicating hunger, and so on. So it becomes a very interesting part of or topic for cooperation between countries. So I think what Indonesia is doing, I think is very much in the normal procedure or normal practice of international relations. Yeah.
I also read from an article from I think it's from Japan, and Prime Minister Ishiba said that Japan will provide training on school meal management. My question is, do they have that, I mean, experience on that matter?
I really don't have any first-hand knowledge on this, but I would assume yes. I mean, Japan's school system is one of the top in the world, and I would guess that their school management system, including if they provide free meals, would be something that Indonesia could learn from.
Yeah, I think the Japanese school system is very much relying upon, the assurance that all the school kids have adequate, nutritious meals every day. I think it's even in the curriculum, somewhat similar to the French school system, I hear. They also really meticulously plan the diets of the school kids, which is quite interesting. Maybe they can somehow implement some of the principles here. But Mbak Fifi, maybe we can follow up also about the statement made by the Prime Minister Ishiba during that meeting about the security issues, especially the mention of China in this meeting. What are your thoughts on that, Mbak Fifi?
It's somewhat expected, of course. And I think even when he was leaving Tokyo, going to Kuala Lumpur, I think he made a press statement about what he wants to do. And I do think that one of the focus that he mentioned was on security in the region. I think he mentions also about China in the region and so on. So I think it is expected. But I do think that, he was also carrying the same message when he was in Kuala Lumpur, I think.
Okay.
Although I think he framed that into a bigger picture of Japan-ASEAN relations as well, with Malaysia being the chair of ASEAN. So it's an agenda that he is...
He's following up on
exactly,
his...
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Prof. Aryawan, he also mentioned, President Prabowo Subianto, mentioned about the need of cooperation in the education sector and also human resources. What are the chances for the economic ties being strengthened in those sectors, according to your knowledge?
I think the first one is scholarship and capacity building. That's also one of the enhanced educational exchange program. And as we know, that Japan is very concerned since a long time ago, I think, to provide scholarship with Indonesian students under the MAX program, as I mentioned. And then they will build university partnership. And if I'm not mistaken, that collaboration between leading Japanese and Indonesian university has been established before. Some state university has been collaborated regarding dual degree, joint degree, academic programs, and of course, strengthening Indonesian human capital. So I think this is very important. And Japan also focusing on vocational training in Indonesia. So I think Japan support in this and to prepare workforce and advanced industry like robotics, automotive, and renewable energy services. So I think this will be focused if you ask me about the education sectors. And we do hope that the more collaboration, more scholarship with to the youngsters, to the young people in Indonesia, And then, of course, Indonesia can learn more and bring and bring back
bring home
our diaspora, go back to Indonesia, and then build Indonesians in here. Yes.
One of the most sensitive issues when it comes to Japan-Indonesia relations is a lot of Indonesians think that Japan is quite reluctant in technology transfer. They're not actually sharing the most updated technology. It's more of, one of the more recent years. What are your thoughts on this? And will that change in this new chapter of cooperation?
Yes, I think it's very good questions because, as I mentioned, that Japan quite different, typical with China. More safety, bit close, but now they're trying to open. They're trying to build many cooperations with especially in Asia country and ASEAN for sure. And I think start from now, I think from this collaborations today, start from the PM, number one, with collaboration with President Prabowo. I think this is a good start from them. Hopefully, I heard that one of the collaboration also technology transfer, one of them, the main topic that will be discussed. Okay. So we do hope that from the student exchange, from the human capital sides, and from the technology, manufacture AI, robotic, they will spend more and then they will involve more Indonesian people here so they can transfer technology to build Indonesia better because it's more than close relationship between Indonesia and Japan before.
So it's like a new chapter or new approach from
yes, a new chapter
to Indonesia.
Yes.
Okay, and we'll continue our discussion after this. But before, Japan is one of Indonesia's largest foreign investors for decades, with investments going into various sectors and industries, even though other countries have surpassed Japan in terms of investment value in Indonesia in the past few years. It continues to be the country's major economic partner. And let's look at this report.
Japan and Indonesia have built a long-standing economic relationship that can be traced back to the 1970s, when Japanese manufacturers, especially those in the electronics sector, began establishing factories in Indonesia. A wave of Japanese expatriates migrated to Indonesia following the industrialization, which then continued with other types of industries built in the country, such as automotive and consumer products. However, the newly built industrial ecosystem in Indonesia was tarnished with the growing anti-Japanese and anti-foreign investment sentiments from various Indonesian groups. In the 1980s, Japanese investment in Indonesia flourished to other areas, such as public utilities, energy and mining, and the real estate market. Japanese automotive brands such as Toyota, Honda, and Mitsubishi hold the largest market in Indonesia due to their affordability. In the eyes of Japanese investors, Indonesia is an attractive destination for business expansion due to its large population, low-cost workforce, and a growing economy. In addition, Indonesia has an abundance of natural resources which are needed by Japanese manufacturers for their supply chain. In the 21st century, Japan remains one of Indonesia's biggest foreign investors, with thousands of Japanese companies operating in Indonesia as of now. According to the Investment Ministry's data, by the end of September 2024, Japan stood as sixth largest foreign investor in Indonesia, with investment value reaching $2.52 billion from January to September 2024. The investments went into more than 6,900 projects in the country. One of the most significant multi-year projects of Japan in Indonesia is the Jakarta Mass Rapid Transit, or MRT, which was built in 2013 under then-President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono and then Jakarta Governor Joko Widodo. The initial idea of MRT came out for the first time in 1985 by Baharudin Yusuf Habibie, who was the head of the National Technology Agency, or BPPT. First designed in 2008, the MRT Jakarta currently continues to expand, with new lines and stations being added to support public transportation system in the country's biggest city. When President Joko Widodo took office in 2014, he prioritized infrastructure development nationwide, which attracted Japan as one of the largest players in the sector. Japan invests in development of toll roads, dams, ports, sanitation, and the latest one being a semi-high-speed railway from Jakarta to East Java's capital Surabaya, which is currently under feasibility study. The weakening of Japan's economy in the past decade, which was worsened by COVID-19 pandemic, have impacted Japanese investment in Indonesia in the past 5 years. In September last year, Japan was no longer among top 5 of Indonesia's foreign investors. And now, under its new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, Japan is committed to reignite economic and investment potentials with Indonesia and the rest of Southeast Asia. It is a good momentum for Indonesia under a new administration of President Prabowo Subianto, who has promised a higher economic growth during his term.
So there you have it, Japan, one of Indonesia's biggest trading partner and investor, although no longer top 5, but now we can be encouraged and be optimistic that Japan will reignite the economic ties between their country and with Indonesia.
Starting with today's dialogue with President Prabowo Subianto. And to Mbak Vivi, now Mbak Vivi, with the growing situation globally and also this meeting, Prabowo Subianto and also the Prime Minister of Japan, how do you see all of this? What can you conclude with all of this situation?
Sure. I think Indonesia and Japan has demonstrated since 1958 of the good cooperation between the two countries. And I think, in the years to come, there are only going to be more and more incentives for closer cooperation, taking into account the developments in the region, the situation in the US, situation in China, and so on. So there is only going to be more incentive for closer cooperation. And I think for Indonesia and Japan, on the top of their shared interest is, of course, fostering regional security and stability. Issues like sustainable development is going to be, some of the more important issues going into the future. But I think what's also interesting is that we mentioned about how important Japan-ASEAN relation is. And I think to a certain extent, Indonesia-Japan relations can serve as a model for Japan's bilateral cooperation with other countries in the region as well, because if we can prove that Japan-Indonesia's relations can only be better in the future, that also serves as a model how Japan interacts with other countries in the region as well. And I do think that good Indonesia-Japan relations can only contribute to a better Asia-Pacific situation. Both countries are very wary about the situation with China, is wary about the future of their cooperation with the US. And I think only by increasing or even strengthening their bilateral cooperations can they actually ensure their interests going forward into the future.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. On that optimistic note, we'd like to thank you as well.
Thank you.
Bu Shafia F. Muhibat, Deputy Executive Director for Research of CSIS. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you for having me here again.
Yeah, so we will have a quick break, but we will have another chat after this. So don't go anywhere. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back to TVI World Special Report on the Japanese Prime Minister's state visit. And we're here still with Professor Aryawan Gunadi from Tarumanagara University. And before the break, we've seen the dialogue between President Prabowo and also Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. What I would like to ask Professor Aryawan is, how can Japan, or what should Japan do to make sure that this cooperation, this new chapter or this new approach from Japan to Indonesia can run well? Not like maybe the previous agreement that maybe it doesn't took off the way we hoped?
Yeah, that's a good point. Japan has many cooperation with Indonesia, energy, technologies, manufacture, and everything. But don't forget that Indonesia, as a part of ASEAN, they have a cooperation also with Japan. So Japan has to, be more lobby, be active with the Asian countries. That's why Ishiba start with Malaysia and Indonesia. Of course, because Malaysia will be a chair of ASEAN. And I think by approaching Asian countries, especially Malaysia and Indonesia, both of them are dominated and powerful country in Asian. I think this is good because Indonesia and Japan will have more contribution on that trade agreements. And the other else, I think what Japan has to do is that more approach with another ASEAN countries like Thailand, Vietnam also that we discussed.
Yeah.
Also strong in automotive. I think also has to be approached by Japan itself. So the more negotiation, the more approach by Japan to Asian countries, I think will be better. And focusing on the Asian-Japan trade agreement and negotiation agreement, I think also good for Japan.
Okay, so seeing it not just a bilateral but multilateral cooperation with the whole region as an ally.
Yes. Because not only state to states, right? But regional group with the states, I think also good.
Okay. Now, Prof. Aryawan, I would like to touch upon another subject that has been quite a problem for Japan for the past 15 years, and that is the decline of their population.
Yeah.
They've been trying to figure out how to increase the younger population, but it hasn't succeeded so far. How do you see this problem, and how can Indonesia play a part to help Japan with this problem?
Because we have millions, hundreds of millions.
When it comes to human resources, I think we have that in abundance.
Yeah. Declining of population is one of the biggest issue in Japan. That's why maybe they have policy. I'm not expert on this, but maybe they have policy for the birth rate.
Yeah.
They have a
some
policy.
Incentives for young
for them
families.
who have young family, marry each other and something like that. But Indonesia, in other side, we have many big populations, right? Because the bigger, the better. but of course, if we see from this issue that Japan concerned with this, I think Ishiba and all the ministerial and the government will have a new policy for this, I believe, because they pay attention with birth rate and the marriage position. They also pay attention with the declining of populations. And I think from this, we can collaborate with Indonesia, how they, because they will invest in human capital. Involving only a part of Japanese people, I think it's not complete. They have to include, they have to complete with another country. That's why making collaboration with many countries, I think it's good. Especially, as I mentioned before, with the Asian countries. Please approach Vietnam, Thailand, and another country that will be benefit for Japan, I think.
Still about the declining population, is that a factor that will be considered in like a cooperation, bilateral cooperation between two countries? Is that something that will be considered?
Yes. I've heard that. That one of the concerns is that if you invest something, because investment need more population, right? Some of them, not only in technology and infrastructure. Of course, another side, maybe there's some business and investment need more population, need more people there. So I think what Indonesia have to do, focusing on what sectors that be benefit for Indonesia, transfer to Japan. Because we are focusing with natural resources, we are strong of that. We are focusing in healthcare sector. We are focusing in infrastructure. We are focusing in technologies. But that's also a good play role for investing in Japan. Okay. But investing in human capital, I think one of the best things that we can do for Japan, I think.
Okay.
You said also that you suggest or you hope that Japan also establish a cooperation between other Asian countries. With Indonesia and Malaysia as the two first countries visited by the Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, and we are also two biggest countries in ASEAN, I assume. What differences between Indonesia and Malaysia in terms of our collaboration with Japan and Malaysia's partnership with Japan. How do you think?
Yes. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Japan will focusing with cybersecurity.
Okay.
Cybersecurity. That's one of the point. Also, they will discussing about South China Sea, the conflict, because as we know that some island in China.
Malaysia has a claim.
Yes, has a claim in those south. So they will discuss more about this, and then they will settle about this.
Okay.
So using Malaysia as a good partner for Japan, I think this is what a good strategy for Japan, I think.
Okay.
And the second one, the difference with Indonesia. Indonesia, if we see from the statement from the President Prabowo, will focusing on several factors, several sectors. I mean, free nutritious meal as their program, his program, and also security, defense, arm transfer, and maybe collaboration in defense security. So we will see whether how far Japan can contribute with Indonesia, and of course. If we know that in the past few years that Japan support for the port, I think Pantimun port, and also toll road, and also supporting the MRT as we discussed before. So we will see how far Japan will involve more in several investment in Indonesia.
Yeah.
Not only China. As I mentioned, this is a good competition for Indonesia.
Healthy competition.
Actually good for us.
It's
yeah,
good
to
for
have
us.
this competition between the two countries. Prof.
So we will
Aryawan.
compare between WUS and MRT.
And MRT, okay.
You choose, right?
Yeah. And I think it's lucky us to have these different modes of transportation to take us to different places, right?
Some of the old building, built by Japan, and we know that Japan, every people know that good in infrastructure.
Yeah.
You know, even that's an old building, but it's a good maintenance because Japan focusing on that, a good maintenance.
And security,
And
of the building itself.
security of the building, the lifetime of the building, something like that.
Yeah,
So
I
we
think
will see.
Yeah, it's because maybe Japan also is prone, it's in the earthquake area,
Yes,
so
earthquake area.
they develop this kind of
They have many experiences.
They have natural disaster management. When I visited Kobe a few years ago, that's, last time Kobe, it's disaster. Nothing's there because of the disaster, because of the earthquake.
Yes.
You see Kobe, you can search in Google, we can visit there. It's a good city, very good, especially for the Kobe beef. It's
Yes,
nice.
yes. World famous.
World famous,
Kobe beef.
world famous. The development, the buildings, and every infrastructure is good. And we can see from the sites how they develop. There are lots of video in the road. You can see where when it happens, the disaster happened. Many people died there, and how they develop and transform, become a good cities, Kobe.
All right, Prof. Aryawan, we are actually still waiting now for the press conference from the state leaders to give us a summary of the discussions. But while we wait for that, maybe we can go back to the start of the program where we mentioned that a number of defense cooperation is about to take place between Japan and Indonesia. And that is in line actually with the mission of Prime Minister Ishiba to expand military power of Japan. But do you think that pose an area of implication when it comes to relations between Indonesia and China? Because as we know, Indonesia has really strong economic ties with China, and then there's the South China Sea conflict happening, and it's a sensitive issue all around. Moreover, we know that Japan is officially in support of Ukraine, and Indonesia is, of course, a partner of Russia, especially now that we are a member of BRICS. How do you see this overlapping interest in the name of international relations, especially between Indonesia and Japan?
Yeah, I think that's a good point because from the constellation, from the international relation now, in the beginning, in the early of 2025, we see some kind of changes. Firstly, that Indonesia joined BRICS as a full membership. Some people say that this is quite fast because it's out of our prediction that it's very fast. But we will see the constellation between Indonesia and how they built a good relation with China, especially with Russia, India, and South Africa, especially with China. And another constellation is that the accession member in OECD, as I mentioned before. Another constellation, another issue is that the Russia-Ukraine. And another issue, the elected Donald Trump will be inaugurated on January, become the president of the United States. And the last one is that how they develop Indonesia and Japan cooperation in establishing IGPA itself. So we see from this all international relations issues, we see that that's a lot of things that we can remember. That diplomacy is one of the most important things. in negotiation and in relationship between countries and another countries. I suggested that Indonesia have to be actively in the international forum.
Okay.
It's not only building, because we're a non-bloc country, so we have to build, we have to be pretty, we have to be good in joining relationship with many countries.
Okay.
And also have a good relation with many international associations like WTO, like United Nations. I just visited Geneva in 3-4 months ago.
Okay.
And we have some cases, of course, in WTO. And we do hope that we win the case.
Okay,
We
it's
do
ongoing
hope.
right now.
Yes, it's ongoing. So actually, some of the representative of the WTO and the UN also discussing with me how far Indonesia can involve in international negotiation and international trade. Because what we see is that the more people, the more policy, it will affect with our people. So we see how far that this international relation among Indonesian with other countries will affect its own policy. We will see, because we, as we mentioned, that we are non-bloc country.
Yeah.
So we are not focusing on China itself, but there's United States will involve many things. Because if they pose or they pose the tariff with 100%, example with Japan or with China, it will affect with Indonesia also. We will see how far it will affect Indonesians' market.
Okay. The delicate works of diplomacy is very much needed right now. So good luck to our colleagues in Foreign Affairs Ministry. They have a big task upon them.
Our discussion is still interesting, but we have to make way for this commercial break. So I think don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after the short messages.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba began his international trips to 2 countries in Southeast Asian region, Indonesia and Malaysia, as he sought to strengthen defense and economic ties with the 2 countries. That would be Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's first international trips after being installed as Japanese Prime Minister in October last year. His visit underscores the important role of the 2 Southeast Asian countries amid China's increasing maritime presence in the region. Malaysia assumed the ASEAN chairmanship this year, while Indonesia is Southeast Asia's largest economy. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba was born in February 1957 and is blessed with 2 children. He was born and raised in Tokyo from a political family. His father, Jiro Ishiba, served as governor of Tottori Prefecture from 1959 to 1974 before becoming the Minister of Home Affairs. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has spent most of his time in the politics. After graduating from Keio University, he spends a stint in banking business before venturing into politics following the demise of his father in 1986. And from there on, he has assumed various political jobs until he was appointed defense minister before his appointment as prime minister last year. He is also the president of Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP. Ishiba is also known as a Gunji Otaku, or a military geek, due to his extensive knowledge of the armed forces and the fact that he likes to relax by building plastic models of warplanes and ships. In a past TV interview, he described the hobby as like bringing a dream to reality. He once stayed up all night assembling a miniature version of the aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov to present to the Russian defense minister. Like Ishiba, President Prabowo Subianto also served as defense minister under the administration of former President Joko Widodo from 2019 to 2023. President Prabowo is also chairman of the Great Indonesia Movement Party, or Gerindra. Prime Minister Ishiba is known to have extensive experience in agricultural policies and defense policies, media reports suggested. Prime Minister Ishiba has been a key figure within the LDP, with him being elected as president of LDP since 2024. Before meeting with President Prabowo, Prime Minister Ishiba met with Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim on Friday. In regard to Indonesia, media reports said that both leaders are expected to focus on military cooperation and arms transfers. Ishiba's visit to Indonesia follows recent developments on bilateral relations. Defense Minister Gen Nakatani met with his Indonesian counterpart on January 7th in Jakarta, agreeing that defense officials from both countries would begin discussions on maritime security cooperation. In the meeting with Prabowo, Ishiba is expected to pledge the provision of high-speed patrol boats as part of the OSA initiative. The two leaders will also discuss the joint development of vessels based on Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force destroyers.
Japan has a total population of around 125.58 million, with median age of 48.4 years. Low fertility rate and a high number of elderly people caused Japan's population in a downtrend since 2009, when its population was around 128.57 million. Japan is a constitutional monarchy with the emperor as head of state, whose role is limited to ceremonial ones, and the prime minister as head of government. The current emperor, Naruhito, succeeded his father, Akihito. The 62-year-old Naruhito became the 126th monarch in the country in May 2019. The current Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, who succeeded Fumio Kishida on October 1, 2024, following the 2024 Liberal Democratic Party prime ministerial election. Ishiba has been a member of the House of Representatives since 1986 and has served as Minister of Defense from 2007 to 2008 and Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries from 2008 to 2009, as well as being the Secretary General of the LDP from 2012 to 2014. 4 decades, Japan had been world's second biggest economy after the United States. In more recent times, due to the emergence of China, Japanese economy ranked the 3rd highest globally, ahead of Germany, the biggest economy in Europe. Japan's strong economy made it a member of the G7, which comprised of 7 democratic industrial countries. The G7 held significant influence in shaping global trade trends. The members of this group have strong currencies used in international trade, the vein of the globalized world economy. Japan is also a member of Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC and a prominent member of East Asia Summit. In 2019, Japan held the presidency of G20. On the security front, Japan joined hands with India, Australia, and the US to establish Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, more commonly known as Quad, in 2007. The Quad, which was revived in 2017, is aimed at balancing China's growing military activity in the Indo-Pacific region. Aspiring for free and open Indo-Pacific, the Quad is expected to counter China's maritime planes on the waters of the South China Sea. Diplomatic relation between Japan and Indonesia was established in 1958, 13 years after the Imperial Japan lost the Second World War. In decades since then, trades and investments between the two countries went from strength to strength. The most obvious sign of Japanese influence in Indonesia is on the automotive sector. Japanese car brands such as Toyota, Honda, and Mitsubishi can be easily spotted in every corner of Indonesia. And the same goes with Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki motorbikes. Due to its logistic power, Japan primarily exports machineries and their related services to Indonesia, while Indonesia exports natural gas and other commodities and raw materials to Japan. Trades between Indonesia and Japan slumped to $24.3 billion in 2020 due to COVID-19, but rebounded strongly to $32.5 billion in 2021. In the first 9 months of 2022, two-way trades reached $31.2 billion, an increase of more than 34% compared to the same period a year earlier. Japan is also a major investor in Indonesia with foreign direct investment of $2.77 billion in January to September period. Japan ranked as the 4th largest source of foreign direct investment in Indonesia.
The journey and closeness of the relationship between the two countries has so far served as strong evidence of the inter-society relationship, as the diplomatic relation continues to strengthen year to year. Indonesia is not only a partner of Japan in progress, but also a beacon for the growth, peace, and stability of the region. The frequent visits of the two countries' leaders are among many factors which reflect the strong relationship between the two countries. The latest one was in December 16, 2023, when President Joko Widodo visited Japan to attend the commemorative summit for the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan friendship and cooperation. During the visit, the Indonesian president also met with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba began Thursday, January the 9th, a 4-day trip to Malaysia and Indonesia to sit down with their leaders as Tokyo aims to strengthen economic and security ties with the Southeast Asian nation. Prime Minister Ishiba will then visit Indonesia and is scheduled to hold a meeting with President Prabowo Subianto in Jakarta on Saturday, January the 11th. The leaders of the two countries have frequently held bilateral meetings during the last several years to further strengthen cooperation in various fields. In September 2023 was one of milestones in the economic relationships, during which the two countries agreed to elevate the bilateral relationship to a comprehensive and strategic partnership in light of the long-standing friendship and the progress of cooperation in various areas, thereby further strengthening bilateral relations. The progress of bilateral cooperation between Japan and Indonesia has contributed to Indonesia's development to date, particularly through economic relations and economic cooperation. At present, almost 2,000 Japanese companies with about 7.2 million of Indonesian employees are operating throughout Indonesia, and together they contribute approximately 8.5% to Indonesia's GDP and nearly 25% of exports, according to a statement issued by the Foreign Minister of Japan ahead President of Joko Widodo's visit on December 16, 2023. Looking to the future, Japan intends to further enhance cooperation with Indonesia under the Comprehensive and Strategic Partnership, including by deepening the bilateral cooperation and initiatives, as well as developing the achievements. Japan will, for example, continue to support the extension of the Jakarta Mass Rapid Transit, or MRT, development, and several other projects such as the Patimban Port Development in Subang, West Java, Bekasi Automobile Proving Ground Project, and technical cooperation for transit-oriented development. In other fields, Japan also intends to further cooperate in maritime and outer islands development, such as provision of patrol vessel and fisheries patrol vessels, development of fisheries ports and markets. Japan also cooperates with the Indonesian government in the development of the country's new capital, Nusantara, such as in technical cooperation support and also in various other fields, such as in legal system development, information and communications cooperation, agriculture, science and technology, and healthcare. Indonesia also continues to expand trade relations with Japan. On August 8, 2024, Trade Minister Zulkifli Hasan and Japan's Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa signed the Protocol of Amendment to the Indonesia-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement. The protocol is expected to shoot up the total value of Indonesia's exports to Japan to $35.9 billion by 2028, or about 58% higher than the $20.8 billion recorded in 2023. According to the Indonesian minister, the protocol changes several chapters of the partnership agreement, namely trade in goods, trade in services, electronic commerce, movement of natural persons or MNP, cooperation in intellectual property, and government procurement.
じゃあこの前行ってたカフェに行ってみるのはどう？おう、それいいね。ねえラミ、見て見て。わあ、お花が喜んでるね。
Japan and Indonesia have built a long-standing economic relationship that can be traced back to the 1970s, when Japanese manufacturers, especially those in the electronics sector, began establishing factories in Indonesia. A wave of Japanese expatriates migrated to Indonesia following the industrialization, which then continued with other types of industries built in the country, such as automotive and consumer products. However, the newly built industrial ecosystem in Indonesia was tarnished with the growing anti-Japanese and anti-foreign investment sentiments from various Indonesian groups. In the 1980s, Japanese investment in Indonesia flourished to other areas, such as public utilities, energy and mining, and the real estate market. Japanese automotive brands such as Toyota, Honda, and Mitsubishi hold the largest market in Indonesia due to their affordability. In the eyes of Japanese investors, Indonesia is an attractive destination for business expansion due to its large population, low-cost workforce, and a growing economy. In addition, Indonesia has an abundance of natural resources which are needed by Japanese manufacturers for their supply chain. In the 21st century, Japan remains one of Indonesia's biggest foreign investors, with thousands of Japanese companies operating in Indonesia as of now. According to the Investment Ministry's data, by the end of September 2024, Japan stood as sixth largest foreign investor in Indonesia, with investment value reaching $2.52 billion from January to September 2024. The investments went into more than 6,900 projects in the country. One of the most significant multi-year projects of Japan in Indonesia is the Jakarta Mass Rapid Transit, or MRT, which was built in 2013 under then-President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono and then Jakarta Governor Joko Widodo. The initial idea of MRT came out for the first time in 1985 by Baharudin Yusuf Habibie, who was the head of the National Technology Agency, or BPPT. First designed in 2008, the MRT Jakarta currently continues to expand, with new lines and stations being added to support public transportation system in the country's biggest city. When President Joko Widodo took office in 2014, he prioritized infrastructure development nationwide, which attracted Japan as one of the largest players in the sector. Japan invests in development of toll roads, dams, ports, sanitation, and the latest one being a semi-high-speed railway from Jakarta to East Java's capital Surabaya, which is currently under feasibility study. The weakening of Japan's economy in the past decade, which was worsened by COVID-19 pandemic, have impacted Japanese investment in Indonesia in the past 5 years. In September last year, Japan was no longer among top 5 of Indonesia's foreign investors. And now, under its new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, Japan is committed to reignite economic and investment potentials with Indonesia and the rest of Southeast Asia. It is a good momentum for Indonesia under a new administration of President Prabowo Subianto, who has promised a higher economic growth during his term.
Welcome back to our special report on the Japanese Prime Minister's state visit to Indonesia. Right now, in this moment, the Prime Minister of Japan is still discussing with President Prabowo Subianto on all the matter, all the issues in the region, and also the bilateral cooperation between the two countries. Yes.
Right now, to Prof. Aryawan, after seeing all the topics and discussion and seeing how the latest development is between the relations of Japan and Indonesia, what are your final thoughts on this new chapter of cooperation between the two countries, Prof. Aryawan?
Yes, the first is that Japan has been one of the major trade and investment partners of Indonesia. So I think this good bilateral relationship has to be, continued until this period, I think. So not only for the period of President Prabowo, maybe not until the next president. And second one, that Japan has been a stable trading partner for Indonesia and as an export destination of energy and natural resources, as well as an import source to meet strong demands such as automotive and machinery that we have been discussed before. So at that time also we have many cooperation in infrastructure, development, energy transition, climate change, agriculture and fisheries. And also we invest collaboration more with MRT and some infrastructure projects. So we do hope that we have stability in infrastructure and energy investment. And secondly, we have a strategic collaboration because I've heard that Japan has commitment more than 10 billion under AITA to support Southeast Asia energy. So we do hope that it will make stronger for Indonesia-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, or IGPA. And with the amendments in 2024, they will discuss it today, how to implement, how to execute that cooperation agreement. And the last one is that from the technology-driven investment, also important, how far that Japan high values in technology will be transferred to Indonesia. I think it's also important for Indonesia human capital, because AI automotive aligns with Indonesian long-term industrial plan. So we do hope from this. And lastly, maybe because Pak Prabowo mentioned several programs, I think we wait from the support from the Japan itself. How far they support from the free nutritious meals, support the energy, support the defense security, and etc. That's it.
And we've been informed that we already has the visual from the State Palace in Bogor about the press statement.
Yes. In the meantime, we'd like to extend our warmest thanks to Prof. Aryawan Gunadi from Dharma University. Thank you so much, Prof. Always good to see you. Until next time.
Good to see you. Until next time. Thank you.
日本国内閣総理大臣石破茂閣下. Yang kami hormati para menteri dan delegasi dari Indonesia dan Jepang, hadirin yang berbahagia. Indonesia Nihon Ryokoku Daijin oyobi Homondang no minasama. Selanjutnya marilah kita simak pernyataan pers bersama. Untuk mengawali, kami mengundang yang terhormat Presiden Republik Indonesia, Bapak Prabowo Subianto. これより合同記者会見を開始いたします。はじめにインドネシア共和国大統領プラボウ・スビアント様よりの記者会見でございます。
Yang saya hormati dan yang saya muliakan, Yang Mulia Perdana Menteri Jepang, Saudara Ishiba Shigeru dan Nyonya Ishiba Yoshiko. Para menteri dan pejabat tinggi dari kedua negara, rekan-rekan media yang saya hormati, saudara-saudara sekalian, dimanapun saudara berada, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, salam sejahtera bagi kita sekalian, konnichiwa, selamat siang.
はじめに日本国総理大臣石破茂閣下並びに石破裕子の夫人、そして日本訪問団の皆様、そして本日ご来場の皆様、こんにちは。
Pertama-tama, sekali lagi saya sampaikan kepada Yang Mulia Perdana Menteri Ishiba Shigeru dan Ibu beserta seluruh delegasi Jepang, selamat datang di Indonesia, selamat datang di Bogor. Ini adalah suatu kehormatan bagi kami menerima Yang Mulia sebagai tamu negara pertama di tahun 2025.
改めまして、石破茂閣下並びに石破夫人をはじめ、皆様をボゴル宮殿に歓迎できることを光栄いたします。この訪問は2025年において初の国賓の訪問となります。
Kunjungan ini adalah mencerminkan komitmen yang kuat dari kedua pihak untuk mempererat hubungan antara kedua negara dan memperkuat kemitraan strategis komprehensif Indonesia-Jepang dan juga komitmen kita untuk terus mencari bidang-bidang kerjasama yang lebih intensif.
この訪問はインドネシアと日本の 包括的戦略的パートナーシップの強化を強いコミットメントの証でございます。で、そしてこれからいろんな分野においてさらなる協力を強化する証にもなります。
Saudara-saudara sekalian, tadi pertemuan saya dengan Perdana Menteri Jepang berlangsung dengan sangat hangat, sangat bersahabat, dan sangat intensif. Setelah kami bertemu langsung, kami lanjutkan dengan pertemuan bilateral antara menteri-menteri kami dengan pejabat-pejabat tinggi kami. Pertemuan juga berjalan cukup padat, cukup intensif, dan kami bahas banyak masalah kerjasama bilateral, isu-isu penting regional dan geopolitik dunia, dan juga komitmen bersama untuk meneruskan kerjasama di bidang ekonomi dan infrastruktur, juga di bidang ketahanan energi, hilirisasi industri, kemudian di bidang bantuan kepada kerjasama juga di bidang pertanian, sumber daya manusia, kesehatan, dan juga kami menjelaskan berbagai isu di mana Indonesia memiliki keinginan untuk memelihara hubungan baik dengan semua negara-negara di dunia, semua blok-blok ekonomi di mana kami ingin memelihara suatu hubungan yang erat sehingga dapat menyumbang kepada suasana yang bisa menurunkan ketegangan di antara negara-negara besar. Saya kira itu yang dari saya. Kami berkomitmen untuk meneruskan hubungan kita yang lebih konkret, lebih efektif. Kami undang Jepang untuk ikut serta dalam program yang kami canangkan menuju industrialisasi Indonesia, terutama di bidang hilirisasi, dan mereka juga berminat untuk bantu di bidang makan bergizi karena mereka pun punya pengalaman di bidang itu sudah 80 tahun, dan mereka yang menawarkan inisiatif mereka untuk ikut membantu mungkin dengan pelatihan dan lain sebagainya. Saya kira demikian. Saya undang mereka untuk ikut dalam kerjasama di bidang pangan, di bidang maritim, di bidang energi, perikanan, dan sebagainya. Saya kira demikian. Kami sekali lagi sangat berterima kasih atas kunjungan ini, dan kami yakin bahwa ini tanda awal dari kerjasama yang lebih baik lagi. Terima kasih.
先ほどは大変温かく有意義のある会談を進めました。私たちはさまざまな分野において話し合いました。はじめにですね、閣下を歓迎した後に、まずはその2人だけの会談を進めました。で、その会談の後は、バイ会談、両国の大臣も含めてバイ会談を進めました。で、そのバイ会談においてはさまざまな分野においてこれからインドネシアと日本のさらなる協力強化についてお話をさせていただきました。例えば経済分野、インフラ開発で、そして、エネルギー保障、産業の下流化、人材育成、保険で、そしてさまざまな 分野においても大変有意義にお話をさせていただきました。その他に先ほどの会談ではインドネシアが平等の立場を保つ維持する思いも伝えさせていただきました。そしてそのインドネシアの取り組みが少しでも世界の緊張感を和らげる取り組みになることを期待しております。さらにインドネシアと日本はこれからすでに同意した協力を引き続き強化していくことも同意いたしました。例えば特にですね、産業の下流化で、そして私の優先プログラムである無償の給食についてもお話をさせていただきました。給食については日本は80年間の経験を持ったことで、その経験共有をぜひさせていただくことをお話をいただきました。ありがとうございます。
Selanjutnya kami mengundang Perdana Menteri Jepang Yang Mulia Ishiba Shigeru untuk menyampaikan pernyataan pers bersama.
続きまして日本国内閣総理大臣石破茂閣下より記者会見をお願いいたします。
今回、総理大臣就任後初の2国間訪問としてマレーシアに続きましてインドネシアを訪問させていただきました。プラボー大統領閣下をはじめインドネシアの皆様方から感動的な温かい歓迎、そしておもてなしをいただいたことに心より感謝を申し上げます。新たな年2025年を迎えまして国際情勢は複雑さ、透明さを増しておりますが、そのような中でも東南アジアは堅調な経済成長を実現する世界の成長センターであり続けております。我が国の外交にとりましてこの東南アジアとの連携強化は最優先の課題の一つであります。特にインド洋と太平洋が交わる要衝であり、この成長センターを牽引するインドネシアは我が国と基本的な価値や原則を共有する包括的戦略的なパートナーであります。我が国は自由で開かれたインド太平洋保育やインド太平洋に関する ASEAN アウトルックの実現にも通じ、世界を協調に導くべく長年の貴重な友人でありますインドネシアと緊密に連携していきたいと考えております。今回インドネシアを訪問し、本日プラボー大統領閣下との間で幅広い分野にわたる率直な意見交換を行いますとともに、大統領閣下との間で信頼関係を深めることができましたことは非常に有意義なことでございました。二国間関係につきましては、安全保障分野におきまして防衛装備技術協力を含む両国の海洋安全保障についての防衛実務者間の協議立ち上げで一致をしたところであります。またインドネシアとの間で初となります OSA 政府安全保障能力強化支援を通じました高速警備艇の供与、外務防衛大臣閣僚会合 2+2 の開催に一致をし、これを含め両国間の戦略的対話を強化することに一致をいたしました。
通訳させていただきたいと思います。Terima kasih. Kali ini saya mengunjungi Indonesia setelah Malaysia sebagai lawatan bilateral untuk pertama kalinya setelah saya dilantik sebagai Perdana Menteri. Presiden Prabowo dan semua pihak dari Indonesia menyambut dan melayani kami dengan kehangatan hati. Untuk itu saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih banyak. Setelah menyambut tahun baru tahun 2025, situasi internasional semakin rumit dan tidak pasti. Walaupun dalam kondisi demikian, Asia Tenggara tetap merupakan pusat perkembangan dunia yang merealisasikan perkembangan ekonomi yang stabil, maka peningkatan kolaborasi dengan kawasan ini merupakan isu yang paling diprioritaskan dalam diplomasi negara Jepang. Khususnya Indonesia yang terletak di posisi pertemuan Samudra Hindia dan Samudra Pasifik dan memimpin pusat perkembangan ekonomi merupakan mitra komprehensif dan strategis yang memiliki pandangan nilai dan prinsip dasar yang sama dengan negara kami, negara Jepang. Supaya membawa dunia ke arah kooperasi melalui Free and Open Indo-Pacific Strategy atau FOIP dan ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific AOIP, negara kami ingin berkolaborasi dengan erat dengan kawan lama kami, negara Indonesia. Lawatan kali ini Indonesia sangat bermanfaat dan bermakna karena pada hari ini telah dilaksanakan tukar pikiran yang terbuka bersama Bapak Presiden Prabowo mengenai berbagai bidang secara luas dan sehingga telah dapat memperdalami hubungan saling percaya antara kami dan Presiden Prabowo. Dalam hal hubungan bilateral di bidang jaminan keamanan telah disepakati untuk membentuk forum diskusi di tingkat praktisi pertahanan terkait jaminan keamanan maritim kedua negara, termasuk kerjasama untuk peralatan pertahanan dan transfer teknologi dan sebagainya. Dan selain itu sudah mencapai kesepakatan pemberian kapal patroli berkecepatan tinggi melalui Official Security Assistance (OSA) yang pertama dengan Indonesia dan penyelenggaraan 2+2 sebagai pertemuan Menteri Luar Negeri dan Menteri Pertahanan. Dengan demikian kita sudah sepakat untuk meningkatkan dialog strategis antara kedua negara.
経済分野におきましては、エネルギーの安定供給に関しまして、協力を強化していくことで一致をいたしました。また、インドネシアの持続的な経済発展を後押ししますため、アジアゼロエミッション共同体 AZEC の下でのムアララボ地熱発電、水素アンモニアバイオ燃料といった脱炭素エネルギー分野や重要鉱物分野での協力を確認いたしました。エネルギー安全保障の確保と多様な道筋による脱炭素化に向けまして資源・インフラ協力を進めてまいりたいと考えております。
Selanjutnya di bidang ekonomi telah disepakati untuk meningkatkan kerjasama pasokan energi yang stabil dan supaya dapat membantu perkembangan ekonomi Indonesia secara berkelanjutan, sudah mengkonfirmasikan kerjasama di bidang dekarbonisasi dan energi, serta bidang pertambangan mineral yang kritis seperti PLTP Muara Rabo di bawah AZEC, Asia Zero Emission Community, dan juga untuk hidrogen, amonia, biofuel, dan sebagainya. Kami ingin mendorong kerjasama di bidang sumber daya dan infrastruktur untuk menjaga jaminan keamanan energi dan dekarbonisasi melalui berbagai jalur.
インドネシアの子どもたちに栄養価の高い給食を提供したいという大統領閣下の思いに応えて、日本の経験も活用して給食研修や専門家派遣を行うほか、漁業・農業開発へ行う協力パッケージを実施してまいります。
Dan untuk mengakomodir keinginan besar Presiden Prabowo untuk menyediakan makan siang bergizi tinggi untuk anak-anak di Indonesia, kami negara Jepang akan menyelenggarakan paket kerjasama termasuk pelatihan penyedia makan siang sekolah, pengiriman tenaga ahli, dan bantuan peningkatan sektor perikanan dan pertanian dengan memanfaatkan berbagai pengalaman negara Jepang.
甚大な被害をもたらしましたスマトラ沖大地震、あるいはインド洋の津波から20年の年月が流れました。インドネシアと日本は共に災害に直面する国でありますが、防災について今回さらに協力を進めてまいることで一致をいたしました。
Dan Bapak Ibu sekalian, kini sudah 20 tahun berlalu sejak terjadinya gempa bumi besar dan tsunami di pesisir Sumatera bagian utara yang mengakibatkan banyak korban jiwa dan dampak yang amat besar. Dalam kesempatan ini sekali lagi saya ingin mengucapkan bela sungkawa sedalam-dalamnya kepada yang menjadi korban. Indonesia dan Jepang merupakan negara yang menghadapi risiko bencana. Dalam hal penanggulangan bencana sebagai life work bagi saya sendiri, kami sudah mencapai kesepakatan untuk melaksanakan kerjasama penanggulangan bencana gunung berapi.
日本とインドネシアの関係は人と人との交流に支えられております。人的育成分野をはじめとする連携をさらに促進し、友好協力関係を強化してまいります。
Bapak Ibu sekalian, seperti kita ketahui, hubungan antara kedua negara yaitu Indonesia dan Jepang didasari oleh hubungan antara manusia dan manusia. Oleh karena itu kami sudah sepakat dan kami ingin sekali untuk kedepannya meningkatkan pertukaran SDM untuk kedepannya.
プラボ大統領閣下とは二国間関係の深化のみならず、地域情勢や国際条理での協力を組みます。幅広い分野についても意見を交わし、 法の支配に基づく自由で開かれた国際秩序を維持強化することの重要性を再確認したところであります。インドネシアの OECD 加盟を含め、国際条理におきまして一層連携を強化することでも一致をいたしました。
Dan kali ini bersama Presiden Prabowo telah bertukar pendapat tidak hanya perkuatan hubungan bilateral saja, tetapi juga mendiskusikan berbagai topik secara luas, termasuk situasi regional dan kerjasama di arena internasional, dan mengkonfirmasikan ulang betapa pentingnya untuk mempertahankan dan memperkuat ketertiban internasional yang bebas dan terbuka berdasarkan supremasi hukum. Selain itu, sudah sepakat untuk meningkatkan kolaborasi lebih lanjut lagi di arena internasional, termasuk aksesi Indonesia untuk menjadi anggota OECD.
プラボ大統領閣下と対面でお会いするのはこれで2度目でありますが、日本インドネシア関係のさらなる進展に向けた一歩を踏み出すための重要で貴重な機会になったと考えております。私も両国関係の進化発展のため、積極的に今後とも取り組んでまいりたいと存じます。
Dan saya bertemu dengan Presiden Prabowo secara tatap muka untuk kedua kalinya. Dan menurut saya, pertemuan kali ini menjadi kesempatan yang penting dan juga sangat berharga untuk maju satu langkah menuju peningkatan hubungan Jepang dan Indonesia lebih lanjut lagi. Dan saya sendiri ingin tetap berusaha terus secara proaktif untuk memperdalam hubungan kedua negara Indonesia dan Jepang.
今回の感動的な歓迎に感謝をいたしますとともに、本年の大阪・関西万博の機会、インドネシアから多くのお客様をお迎えし、おもてなしができますことを楽しみにしております。プラボー大統領閣下を日本に招待し、お迎えをすることを心より楽しみにしております。Terima kasih.
Sebagai penutup, saya ingin menghaturkan rasa berterima kasih sedalam-dalamnya atas penyambutannya, dan saya menantikan momen-momen di mana kami bisa melayani banyak tamu dari Indonesia di Osaka Kansai Japan Expo, dan saya ingin mengundang Presiden Prabowo ke Jepang dan menyambut beliau di negara Jepang. Sekian dari saya, terima kasih.
So that's the joint press statement made by both leaders, President Prabowo Subianto, leader of Indonesia, and Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, the Prime Minister of Japan. That was quite encouraging and optimistic, I think. A lot of interesting points were made. If I may go over my notes, Sesko, it was first started by President Prabowo Subianto, who reaffirmed Indonesia's commitment to strengthening the cooperation in security, economy, and bilateral issues. Agriculture and human resources were also mentioned specifically as vital issues to be expanded in this new chapter of cooperation, and also that would focus on concrete steps and effective results. So more of a broad expressions used by President Prabowo Subianto.
And I want to highlight that he once again said that Indonesia wants to have a good relation with all region to lower, I think he said that to lower the tensions of the world, to be a good neighbor.
And that is in line with what was also mentioned by Prime Minister Ishiba. He mentioned again repeatedly throughout this meeting about the geopolitical instability, and also as it is the important reason to close ties between Japan and Indonesia. And he also mentioned the strategic role both countries play in the regional trade and regional security. Now, there were some points that was made by the Prime Minister that I think is very interesting to note. Firstly, that Indonesia and Japan will establish a defense agreement. So that is in line with the talking points that we've been hearing so far. Cooperation in energy sector will be expanded. Support for the nutritious meal program will be extensively given by Japan to Indonesia, from resources to training. And then a natural disaster mitigation will also be continued and expanded. And then developments and investments in human resources, along with the promise that Japan will support Indonesia's accession to OECD. So a lot of good updates, I would say, Sesko.
Yeah, and the fact that we, Indonesia and Japan, will agree on have a collaboration and cooperation on the disaster mitigation, it's something really good, I think, because we have the same background. We are prone to earthquakes, so I think it will keep our citizens safe from any disasters in the future, I think.
Yes.
And yeah, even though the international condition right now, the Prime Minister of Japan said, is maybe a bit
challenging.
But he said that ASEAN is still a stable region. That's why he wants to have a good understanding and a good cooperation with all of the countries, including Indonesia. And
so overall, I think yeah, a lot to look forward to.
Look forward to, yeah, that's right. And of course, as we said earlier with our guest before, that Japan also will, they also confirm that they will help us with the free nutritious meal program. They will help us with preparing the meals for the school students here in Indonesia.
Apparently they have 80 years of experience.
80 years of experience in their town, in their home country in Japan.
So that's good news, of course, for President Prabowo Subianto's administration, since the nutritious meal program is the centerpiece of his domestic agenda. And other than that, we also had some very encouraging updates on the strengthening of relations between Japan and Indonesia.
Yes, and I think that's all for this special report on the Japanese Prime Minister's state visit, the first visit to the ASEAN region. One of the first visits is to Indonesia after Malaysia yesterday. And that's all for now. I'm Sesko Satrio.
And I'm Siska Becker. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you at the next report. Until then, take care and have a very good weekend.
Bye-bye.